Here's something that should be mathematically impossible. The United States housing market just posted its lowest transaction volume since 1995, meaning fewer homes are selling right now than at any point in 30 years. And in the same breath, home prices are sitting near all-time highs. Simultaneously, fewer people buying, higher prices. In any normal market, those two things cancel each other out. That's how supply and demand works. You learned it in 8th grade. So did I. And yet here we are. The market is frozen. The prices are absurd. The average first-time buyer is now 40 years old. If you've tried to buy a home recently, you already know something is deeply structurally wrong. You just can't quite put your finger on what. I'm Hamster. Today, we're going to do something the real estate industry, the mortgage industry, and most financial media would genuinely prefer you not do. We're going to explain exactly what happened to this market, every domino in order with the actual numbers, so that when you make your next move, you're making it with your eyes open. Hit subscribe if you want to keep running the real math. Let's get into it. Before we dive into the numbers, let's acknowledge the emotional weight. A recent survey found that 67% of renters say they want to buy a home, but only 17% believe they ever will. That's not a market, that's a crisis of hope. And understanding the mechanics won't solve it overnight, but it will help you avoid making a decision driven by desperation. The median existing home price right now is about $435,000. In 2019, just 6 years ago, it was $280,000. That's a 55% jump. Almost identical in magnitude, but different numbers. Not in Manhattan, not in Palo Alto. Nationally, the median, the dead middle of the entire country. Mortgage rates are sitting around 6.7%, which sounds manageable until you remember that in early 2021, you could get a 30-year fixed mortgage for 2.75%. That is a completely different financial planet. Here's what that gap means in actual dollars. Same house, $410,000 purchase price, 20% down, $328,000 mortgage. At 2.75%, monthly payment approximately $1,335. At 6.7%, monthly payment approximately $2,115. That's $780 more per month, every month for 30 years, for the same house, same carpet, same school district, same yard the size of a generous parking space. And the house itself cost $155,000 more than it did 6 years ago. You're paying more for the loan and more for the house, both at the same time. This is not bad luck. It is the output of a very specific sequence of decisions and shocks that piled on top of each other over 5 years. Once you understand the sequence, the current situation stops feeling like chaos and starts feeling like an almost inevitable outcome. If you delayed buying in 2019 because you wanted to save another $10,000 for a down payment, that $10,000 would have been eaten by price increases within a few months. The cost of waiting has been staggering. Someone who waited from 2019 to 2025 needs to earn an additional $430 a month just to cover the interest difference, not to mention the higher principal. The year is 2020. The world is on fire, metaphorically, mostly. And the Federal Reserve, in an act of emergency financial panic, slashes rates to basically zero. They also start buying $120 billion in bonds and mortgage-backed securities every single month, injecting money into the financial system with the commitment of someone who started a bonfire and is now slightly worried they may have used too much lighter fluid. By January 2021, the 30-year fixed mortgage hit 2.75%, the lowest rate Freddie Mac had recorded since 1971. People who'd been sitting on the fence about buying suddenly realized they could afford dramatically more house for the same monthly payment, so they bought and bought and bought some more. But that was only half the fuel. COVID rewired what Americans needed from their homes. Suddenly, your apartment was your office, your gym, your school, your restaurant, and your primary human contact. A 700 square foot place in the city that used to feel fine suddenly felt like a sensory deprivation tank with a Wi-Fi password. Remote work exploded, and millions of people started asking a reasonable question. If I can work from anywhere, why am I paying $2,800 a month to live somewhere I don't actually like? So, they left. Manhattan shed over 200,000 households. San Francisco, Chicago, and Los Angeles each lost tens of thousands. And all of them descended on Austin, Phoenix, Boise, Nashville, Tampa, Places with already tight inventory that suddenly had a stampede of buyers with pre-approvals, pandemic savings, and a desperate need for a home office that wasn't also a closet. National home prices jumped 37% between March 2020 and March 2022, not over a decade, 2 years. Austin climbed 61%, Phoenix 59%, Boise, Idaho 53%. At the peak, nearly 6,000 homes sold for $100,000 or more above asking price in a single month. If you bought in 2020 or 2021, you probably made one of the best financial decisions of your life, almost entirely by accident. That's not skill, that's timing. And for everyone who wasn't in a position to buy during that window, what happened next made everything dramatically worse. The pandemic housing surge transferred an estimated $8 trillion in home equity to existing homeowners, mostly older, already wealthy households. Those who missed the boat didn't just lose appreciation, they lost the ability to ever catch up because the baseline had moved permanently upward. By mid-2022, inflation was running at 9.1%, the highest in 40 years. So the Fed did what central banks do. They raised rates, historically aggressively. 11 hikes in 16 months, from 0.25% to 5.5%. The fastest tightening cycle in 4 decades. January 2022, mortgage rates 3.4%, October 2022, 7.2%, October 2023, 8.0%, highest since 2000. At 8.0%, that $328,000 mortgage would cost $2,405 a month versus $1,335 at the pandemic low. That's over $1,070 more per month. Over the life of the loan, $385,000 more for the same exact house. The median household income is about $84,000. The average American family is roughly $24,000 per year short of qualifying for the average house. Every single quarter-point rate increased prices roughly 1.4 million additional buyers out of the market entirely. Not fewer buyers, gone. Home sales fell from 6.2 million in 2021 to just over 4.1 million in 2025, marking the slowest 3-year stretch the market has seen since the mid-95. We are selling fewer homes today in a country with 100 million more people than 1995, than we sold in 1995. But here's the part that should break your brain. Prices didn't fall. The median price in 2024 hit $435,000, a record that we've essentially been stuck on ever since. Demand collapsed, and supply collapsed at exactly the same time. That created something the modern housing market had never quite seen before, a total freeze. Rates didn't just go up, they went up faster than any time in history. The speed of the increase meant that buyers who had been pre-approved at 3% suddenly faced 6% within 6 months. Many had to back out of contracts or lower their price range dramatically. The psychological whiplash contributed to the freeze. To understand why, you need to understand the thing that is quietly holding this entire market hostage. Right now, about 52% of all outstanding U.S. mortgages carry a rate below 4%. Roughly 22% carry a rate below 3%. If you bought in 2020 or 2021 and locked in 2.75%, you are sitting on a financial instrument that no longer exists. The bank will not recreate it. The market cannot offer it. It is gone, like a limited edition sneaker that sold out and never restocked. If you sell your house and buy another one today, you're not just moving. You're voluntarily surrendering the cheapest money you will almost certainly ever access in your lifetime, and replacing it with money that costs more than twice as much. On a $400,000 mortgage, that swap costs $780 more per month. Every month, forever. That's $93,600 over a decade, just in interest, just for having the audacity to want to live somewhere different. So the rational homeowner stays in the house that's too small, in the nursery that's become a Zoom background, in the neighborhood where they stopped knowing their neighbors 3 years ago. Not because they want to stay, but because a spreadsheet is physically keeping them there. The Atlanta Fed found this effect reduces the probability that any homeowner lists their home by 21 to 23%. The FHFA estimated it has suppressed 1.8 million transactions that would otherwise have happened. Active inventory is still 18% below 2019 levels. Months of supply hovers between 3.2 and 3.7. You need 6 for a balanced market. The market isn't broken in the sense that it's collapsing. It's broken in the sense that it has completely stopped moving. Like a door that won't open or close, just stuck, vibrating slightly, going nowhere. Older homeowners who might want to downsize are also trapped. If they sell their $500,000 home with a 2.8% mortgage and buy a $350,000 condo, they'd have to take out a new mortgage at 6.7% on the difference, or pay cash. Either way, their monthly cost could go up, not down. So they stay. Another source of supply locked away. If you want to understand who's actually getting squeezed hardest, we need to talk about someone specific. Let's call her Maya. She's 31, works in healthcare administration in a normal mid-sized city, makes $76,000 a year, above the national median, no credit card debt, a 760 credit score, $33,000 saved over 3 years of genuine sacrifice, skipped vacations, no new car, one roommate longer than she wanted. By any reasonable standard, Maya is exactly the person homeownership was designed for. Here's what the market offers her in return. The median home in her city is $395,000. With 10% down, her loan is $355,500. At 6.7%, her monthly principal and interest is $2,290. Add property taxes, $380. Insurance, $165. Maintenance reserve, $340. Total monthly cost, $3,175. Maya takes home about $4,780 a month. Housing would eat 66% of her income. She'd have $1,605 left for food, transportation, health insurance, utilities, student loans, and the occasional reminder that she's a human being with a social life. She cannot afford this house, not because she's irresponsible, because the income required to comfortably buy the median home in her market is about $114,000, and she makes $76,000. The gap isn't a personal failing, it's structural, it's baked into the math. There are millions of Mayas, financially solid people, being told by every cultural signal around them that they should own a home by now, while being quietly excluded by numbers that never appear in those signals. Maya saved $33,000, which sounds impressive, but the median down payment for first-time buyers is now 8%, about $34,800 on a $435,000 home. She's close, but even that down payment would leave her with the unaffordable monthly payment. The down payment is no longer the barrier. The monthly payment is. Here's what that actually feels like. It doesn't feel like a crisis. It feels like opening Zillow for the 16th time this week and saving a house you know you can't afford, just to have somewhere to put the feeling. It feels like watching your rent go up $150 in March and realizing your down payment timeline just got 3 months longer for a deposit you've been building for 3 years. It feels like going to your best friend's housewarming, genuinely happy for them, while involuntarily calculating what their monthly payment must be. It feels like being responsible by virtually every measure, and still being systematically kept out of the thing your parents treated as a basic expectation of adulthood. First-time buyers now make up just 20% of all purchases, a record low in 44 years of tracking. The historical norm is 40%. The median age of a first-time buyer is now 41. In the early 1990s, it was 28. Buying at 41 instead of 30 cost roughly $160,000 in lost lifetime equity from the decade of appreciation you missed. Baby boomers now make up 43% of all buyers. Half of older boomers are buying entirely in cash. They sold a house they bought for $200,000 in 1998 that's now worth $720,000, pocketed the equity and walked in with no mortgage dependency, while the 32-year-old is trying to win a bidding war with a pre-approval letter and $33,000 saved. The downstream result, 85% of Gen Z aspiring homeowners are delaying at least one major life milestone because of housing. 30% are postponing having children. 19% are delaying marriage. 1 in 6 aspiring buyers and 23% of millennials have given up on homeownership entirely, not paused, given up. The median first-time buyer being 41 years old is not a quirky data point. It's the statistical fingerprint of a generation squeezed so hard and for so long that the defining marker of middle-class stability has been pushed from early adulthood into middle age. A 2024 study found that housing insecurity is now a leading cause of anxiety among young adults, surpassing job loss. Not being able to buy a home isn't just a financial issue, it's an identity crisis. Homeownership has been sold as the ultimate adult milestone. When it's out of reach, people internalize it as personal failure, even when it's structural. Here's what almost never gets enough airtime. The shortage didn't start in 2020. It was assembled piece by piece over 15 years of underbuilding after 2008. The US is short somewhere between 3.7 and 4.7 million housing units. After the financial crisis, builders pulled back hard for the entire 2000s. Housing starts averaged about 990,000 per year, against a historical baseline of 1.5 million. And what got built skewed heavily toward the upper end of the market because that's where the margins are. The starter home, under 1,400 square feet, the traditional entry point for first-time buyers, went from over 400,000 units a year in the 1970s to just 65,000 in 2020. An 80% decline. The house that was supposed to be the beginning of the wealth-building ladder for working Americans was essentially discontinued as a product. Then came the pandemic surge, then the rate spike, and now tariffs. Steel up 50%, aluminum up 50%, Canadian lumber up 45%. Combined, adding an estimated $11,000 to $18,500 to the cost of every new home. Builders are fighting back with incentives and rate buydowns to 4.5% or lower. But the hard truth is this: the supply problem took a decade to create. It will take at least a decade to meaningfully solve. There is no policy lever anyone can pull that builds 4 million homes in 2 years. The housing shortage is worst in the missing middle: duplexes, townhomes, and small apartment buildings that were once common. These have been largely replaced by either massive apartment complexes or single-family homes. Zoning laws in many cities explicitly prohibit anything in between. At some point in every housing market conversation, someone says it. Is this 2008? No, not even close, and the reasons it's different matter enormously. In 2006 and 2007, subprime mortgages made up 18 to 21% of all originations. Liar loans, interest-only products, negative amortization mortgages, mainstream products. The banking system was betting on home prices rising forever, using money borrowed against itself with zero margin for error. Today, subprime lending is roughly 3.5 to 4.1% of originations. The median credit score at origination is 762, 55 points higher than 2006. In 2009, 26% of all mortgage properties were underwater, the condition that triggers mass defaults, forced sales, and a genuine price spiral. Today, just 2.1% are underwater. Homeowners are sitting on $36.1 trillion in collective equity. Foreclosures in 2024 totaled 171,000. In 2008, they hit 2.3 million. The 2008 crisis happened because banks lent money to people who couldn't repay it based on home values they largely invented. Today, the problem is almost the inverse. The lending is sound. The borrowers are qualified. The equity is real, and you still can't afford anything. Unlike 2008, institutional investors, private equity firms, now own roughly 5 to 7% of single-family rental homes in some markets. They buy in cash, often above asking price, and rent out the properties. This further reduces supply for individual buyers and makes bidding wars even harder. If you are buying, look seriously at new construction. Builder rate buydowns to 4.5 to 5% are real, and the median new home price is essentially at parity with existing homes, something that almost never happens. Just make sure the incentives aren't disguising an inflated base price. Run every number. Also, don't assume the listed price is the final price. In today's frozen market, sellers are often willing to negotiate. Lowball offers that would have been laughed at 2 years ago are now being taken seriously. Ask about seller concessions. They might cover closing costs, buy down your rate, or even include appliances. The housing market you're dealing with is the product of 3 things: 30 months of the cheapest money in American history, 2020 to 2022, the fastest rate hike cycle in 40 years, 2022 to 2023, a decade of underbuilding that left the country 4 million homes short. The people who need prices to fall are priced out of buying even if they do fall. The people who need to sell are financially trapped by the very low rates that made housing affordable 5 years ago. Everyone is stuck at opposite ends of the same problem, for completely opposite reasons. There is no product, no policy, no executive order, and no rate cut that fixes a structural imbalance this large in a single year. The era of buying any house at any price and assuming appreciation will bail you out is over. Running the real numbers before you sign is not pessimism. It's the only sane way to navigate a market this expensive and this broken. You're not crazy for looking at listings and thinking none of this adds up. It genuinely doesn't. And understanding exactly why it doesn't, that's the first step toward making a decision that actually works for you. Instead of just participating in collective financial insanity because everyone around you insists that buying is always the right move. I'm Hamster. Subscribe for more real, no BS finance.